Guten Tag, buenos dias, buenas tardes, konnichiwa, ni hao. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Business of Creativity. We are live on LinkedIn and YouTube for about the next hour. I've got a great session planned for today. So if you're joining the show for the first time, the Business of Creativity is a relaxed space for content marketers and creative professionals to chew the fat on working creatively. Previous episodes have covered creating podcasts, photography, the power of immersive video, and that habit of blurring working life and professional life through creative projects. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel by clicking on the link in the chat section when I post it. And if you want to appear on the show, don't be shy. Come and share your creative experiences, whether it's a project you've worked on or insight on building creative teams in the workplace. Maybe even, your favorite creative trends right now. Just send me a message on LinkedIn. Today, we're looking at creating global content and what it takes to get that right. Linguistic, cultural, legal, and technical challenges. So me, myself, I work in a marketing team that's actively marketing in North America, the UK, the DACH region, which is Germany, Austria, Switzerland, and Eastern Europe. We have 3 working languages in the company where I work. And because we're transatlantic, we're dealing with things like different data privacy policies, regulations. So today, when I speak with Erica Haims, I'm going to be scribbling lots of notes and I'm going to be taking them back to the office tomorrow because Erica is a localization expert. She began her career in the music industry before moving on to the role as content manager at a company called Apple. I don't know how successful a company is going to be if it's named after a fruit, but I don't know. I hope you've got your tea or your coffee ready. If you're in the UK, maybe you've got a beer. If you're in the USA, probably hold on for a few more hours with that beer. And finally, don't forget, say hello and share your thoughts in the chat section. And that's it, really. Let's dive in and meet Erica. Here we go. Hopefully she'll be there. Hi, Erica.
Hi. Hi, Lucy.
Hi. Oh, thanks for joining me, Erica. It's really nice to speak with you today from, is it a sunny San Francisco?
A gloomy
Oh,
San Francisco today.
okay.
A little gloomy, but can't complain.
Yeah. I think the UK is about to get slammed by a storm. So, hold on to our hats. But
Yeah, we're very, very spoiled here.
Yeah, that's lovely. Good for you. So, I'm not jealous. So today we had a chat last week. We were sort of brainstorming this session. And there were so many points that we touched on in the area of content, global content localization. So getting sort of content out to global audiences. And we touched on so many things. I have my handy notepad of scribbled notes. So I'm going to sort of refer back to some of these points that I was really interested to hear about. But I think, to start with, let's just let's just introduce you to people out there watching. We've got someone there with a comment already, I think.
Oh boy.
Paul Bonsfield, warm here in New Zealand there.
Oh
Yeah.
yes. Well, it's summer there. So
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's sunny
they
and
have their
warm.
summer.
Yes, yeah, it's true, isn't it? Yeah, Rose Jacobs, hi, nice to meet you. So people are going to be joining us. So I thought, first of all, let's give people an introduction to who you are, what you do, and how you got into this area.
I mean, I'm sort of an oddity, but I worked in music video where I was the music video team of Atlantic Records, and I was
Okay.
sort of the boring person. I was the person who was supposed to connect the creative with the business. So it was called video administration, contracts, all the boring, all the
Okay.
stuff like Debbie Downer, like well, a term we use in the
I
US.
know, I love Debbie Downer.
I
SNL,
was the person who would say,
SNL.
"Hey, you can't wear that shirt. Hey,
Yeah,
you can't."
yeah.
But so because I was sort of the
Okay.
intermediary
Yes,
between business affairs and finance, I made sure the bills got paid and the
yes,
releases were signed and
yeah.
all that kind of stuff. But
Mm-hmm.
um, what was so interesting is you definitely it was it's considered a major label, so you have various genres
Yeah.
and uh, but one of my favorite projects were when I got to work with different countries because it was kind of
Yes.
interesting when you saw, for example, you know, a band that wasn't very popular in the US would be really
Mm-hmm.
popular in Japan
Yeah.
or
Mm-hmm.
Germany. We did
Yeah.
this we did there was this great Phil Collins hip hop tribute record that
Oh
we
my
did
goodness.
for
Wow.
for
Phil
Warner Music
Collins.
Germany. It was just that all the artists were located here, so we were handling all the business stuff. But
Uh-huh.
that record was only distributed in Germany. So it's just so the international aspect of things really fascinated me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Although you don't really localize music,
Yes.
you may have a Spanish version of a song, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it's you the artist doesn't necessarily translate what they
Yes.
do, but
Yeah.
then there'd be
Yeah.
things like I think in the UK there must have been a big epilepsy issue because we'd have to remove all the strobe lighting for the UK.
Ah, okay. So the
Yeah,
UK
and
was
sometimes
requesting
we'd
that.
have several versions of a video based on, for example, children's television versus something more adult versus, so you could have several versions.
Okay.
Um, and I think that's really why I started thinking of globalization in terms of versions.
Mm-hmm.
I went to work at Apple in their graphic design and video team because
Mm.
they were growing very
Mm.
fast.
Yeah.
This was, I think, when I started there, they were just coming out with their second iPhone. It was
Okay.
so
Mm-hmm.
pretty early. The App Store just hadn't come out yet. So
Mm-hmm.
they were about to go to explode with
Yes. Yeah.
product line and content.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they used third party content was so unique. So I
Mm-hmm.
was brought in because the person who hired me really liked the fact that I kind of juggled with that business and creative.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
Mm.
as you know, working with creative, there's that creative zone.
Yeah. Yeah, but
you
it's
know,
true, isn't it? You get the creative zone, but then there are the boring bits that have to be done,
yeah,
and it
I'm
takes.
the boring bits. Okay, boring bits. That's me.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
embrace the boring bits. That's
yeah.
gonna be our
Somebody has
T-shirts.
to.
Embrace the
Somebody.
boring bits.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
love
Somebody
that.
has to.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. I'm totally using that. And when you work with creatives, it's so interesting.
Hmm.
And I noticed a similarity also when you're working with engineers. There's this, I want to work in my zone and I have my
Mm,
specialty and I need to innovate or I need to be creative and
mm,
I need to do both at the same time. And the thing about my work at Atlantic Records is we were constantly moving. Video productions took basically 2 weeks, to
Okay.
go from shooting rough cut and then
Yeah.
rough cut, I'm sorry, means, that first version you see
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
that they
Okay.
edit together, and you see that
Mm.
first version, and then you're like, "Okay, you gotta make all these changes."
Yeah.
It was interesting because when I got hired at Apple, I didn't even use Apple products. So I
Mhm.
thought, I don't know anything about this. And everyone I worked with was from the ad agency world.
Okay.
And and I was in Silicon Valley, which is just it's another culture.
Okay.
It's a completely
Mm.
different culture. But again, I fell in love with working with the international offices, mostly
Mm.
because there would be what we call in America that game of telephone, or that's probably dating me that I'm very old because we don't have that. I don't know what the kids' term is now, but by the time the message goes downstream, it gets
Mhm.
totally convoluted and
Mhm.
confused.
Yeah.
So, uh, basically, when you have that marketing campaign, that US marketing campaign, by the
Konbanwa.
time,
Sorry.
by the time it gets, when you have it picked up for different countries, version for different countries,
Mm.
you saw so much communication fall through the cracks. So
Yeah.
I loved being that person who would come in because
Mhm.
uh, I was working on the third party content, and third party content for these marketing deliverables
Mhm.
became such a complex thing
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
things didn't it was more than you're versioning, so you're taking eh, that idea. We have
Mhm.
that campaign, and we have
Yeah.
um you have brand guidelines, and you're selling the same product,
Mhm.
but it's experienced differently in different
Yeah.
countries. So I always
Yeah.
found that really, really fascinating. But I think what really attracted me to globalization and working with different countries was I was so frustrated with the amount of communication that got lost.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And
Do you mean within the business
within the
teams?
business
Yeah.
teams,
Yeah.
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 Um, so much information got lost. You'd have that in marketing, you have that, or advertising, you have that project. You have a creative brief. We're coming
Yeah.
out with this stuff, and this is going
Mhm.
to be our campaign,
Mhm.
and you have a lot of people in between, you
Yeah.
know. And international offices are built so differently. You could have one person
Yeah.
responsible for several countries, or
Mhm.
one person wearing a lot of different hats and
Yeah.
serving all these different functions. And
Mhm.
when you work in headquarters, wherever that is,
Mm.
you have several people, and they may serve an individual function. And then
Mm.
internationally, they always it's you have one person who handles a lot of different things, and if you didn't set them up for success,
Mm.
for example, one of our first lessons learned was when you hand over imagery that can't be manipulated. It's called a
Yeah.
flat file.
Uh-huh.
So so if you give them creative that they can't adjust,
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all that stuff really fascinated me.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can't
The
remember
detail.
I can't remember where I read it, but I read an article about this recently. Oh, it was in this marketing sort of weekly marketing magazine over here in the UK. And it was an article about sort of you get your heads of marketing, for example, in the London HQ,
Hmm.
and then they're responsible, for example, campaigns that are going out, for example, in Asia. And there's a lot of there can be a lot of sort of tension between sort of the team out in Asia and the person in the London HQ, because the person in the London HQ has this, they planned this whole campaign and it's all aligned with, with the sales and
Hmm.
everything's, and then they send it out to the local office, and the local office are like, hey, this doesn't work. This isn't going to work for
Yeah,
us.
there's so many things.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
language, is
Mm,
so interesting. I think one of the things we talked about last week is I would call what I did localization.
mm,
I managed the third party content
mm,
use in the marketing deliverables, and
mhm,
then worked on the globalization of the marketing deliverables.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, I found that to be successful, basically the holder of the context,
Mm-hmm.
keeper of the
Yes.
context, so
Yeah.
that when someone picks it up, they
Mm-hmm.
are successful because they have all of the information they need. But
Mm-hmm.
yet, there was also that need to be flexible and receive that information, such as this is not going to work here.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so needing language is very
Mm-hmm.
important. But what I thought I was doing was localization. And then
Mm-hmm.
when I left my role at Apple and met all these localization professionals through networking, all these
Mm.
wonderful organizations and groups on LinkedIn, and meeting people all at events,
Mm-hmm.
I s- or I would be even told, well, that's not localization.
Mm.
Localization is so I became fascinated with, well, why isn't it localization?
Yeah.
um, Translation is not exclusive to it's localization. I think is just so much more. it's
Mm.
it's
Yeah.
it's just, when you're making a product available, that's one
Mm.
thing.
Mm-hmm.
When you're actually marketing to a customer
Mm-hmm.
or adjusting the experience
Mm.
to the customer, and that's really where we're at right now,
Mm.
uh, especially because the pandemic I think the pandemic pushed us further in, because everything has to be online
Yeah.
as opposed to in person. So that
Yeah.
pushed companies to improve their digital experiences
Yes,
to reach
absolutely. Yeah.
customers.
Yeah.
And I think that fast tracked
Mm.
companies to really start to look at their digital experience for the global
Mm.
customer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think companies, you kind of do things I don't do it until I have to. I don't do it till
Mm-hmm.
it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
But then the
Yeah.
pandemic happened, and it was
And then it
okay.
forced us all. Yeah. Yeah.
Then it was
Absolutely.
okay. Well, everything has to
Yeah.
be online, and
Yeah.
but also with the advancements that we've also seen in e-commerce happening at the same time. It's
Mm.
just, in mobile. So
Mm-hmm.
eh, all of that ability to reach a customer in the
Mm.
furthest regions,
Yeah.
get their money, and uh, that gives that customer value.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
gives them power,
Mm.
and they demand, and most customers, all
Mm-hmm.
customers demand personalization. They
Yeah.
demand to be spoken to
Yeah.
directly. They
Yeah.
may not get what they want unless they have a position of power, and a position of power is, in my mind, when there's competition,
Mm. Yeah.
uh, and there's competition in the marketplace. You're not the
Mm.
only
Yeah.
phone. You're not the
Yeah. Yeah.
only
Yeah.
whatever. You're not
Yeah.
the only toaster. in,
There are many toasters.
you
But it's
know,
true, isn't it? Like, yeah, absolutely. I mean, nowadays, yeah, everybody talks about personalization in marketing, that people don't want to be spammed anymore. You can't just blanket message everyone.
mm,
And so when you're looking at global audiences, personalization means languages doing things in their language, and we all
yeah,
know that doing things in their language does not mean a word for word translation of copy, but it's the user experience. I mean,
yes,
even the way, like a website, I know that for Japan, and maybe Kamata-san, I think he may be watching right now, but I in the comment section, but in Japan, they say that Japanese people prefer a lot of information on the homepage because they want all their questions answered like straight away. They want to see a lot of
Right.
detail. Whereas in the UK, perhaps we expect something quite minimalist, and we're okay with that, and we're okay with clicking around to get to the information we want to. But it's not the way in every country, so it's not just about the words,
Right.
but like you said, the experience as well.
Well, you can't please all the people all the time.
Mm,
That's impossible, and it's also
yeah,
bad business. So
yeah,
you're going to lose a
yeah.
lot of money. So there's these things called nice to haves
Hmm.
versus business critical. So
Hmm.
business critical
I'm
is a
gonna
term
write
that
that down.
yeah, I stole that term from my very good friend who's also named Lucy. Um,
Ooh.
and it, when we would speak about why won't they make this decision if
Hmm.
people in Russia don't like this, or it has to be business critical. So it
Yeah.
has to, you'll hear the term move the needle, but it has to be business critical. So uh, I've been focusing, I love to write about the
Yeah.
localization industry,
Yeah.
where I see the disconnect between localization and globalization,
Hmm.
my frustrations maybe as I'm learning more about the localization industry and trying to um, I want to bring them in to
Hmm.
the to the bigger picture,
Hmm.
because they tend to be very siloed. I think
Yeah.
that's changing. I see that
Okay.
completely changing.
Mm.
Um, but I've decided to devote my blog that I call Globalization Motivation this year,
Hmm.
and I'm laser focused
Mm.
on what I write about, and I decided, okay, I need to be focused in order to really articulate what I'm trying to convey.
Yeah.
And that's that there should be more collaboration
Mm.
and amongst vendors and clients, localization teams and the rest of the organization,
Mm.
and that localization teams especially need
Hmm.
to be uh, strategic partners rather than service providers, which is cool because it's the same letters SP. So, so it works perfectly. You could still be
Yeah.
LSP,
You've thought it
but
all through.
you can still be LSP. And I'm probably not the only one who thought of that. And I'm hearing a lot of localization leaders uh,
Mm.
speak about that, that they are handling both globalization and localization now, and
Mm.
they are positioning themselves as a strategic partner. So I want to just
Mm.
keep emphasizing that. Keep all that moving. Look at all that positivity.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
um, but yeah, I think we're seeing a huge change,
Hmm.
and uh, but the consumer demand is what we have,
Mm.
supporting us. It's
Yes. Yeah.
these are the business opportunities you're missing out on.
Mm.
This is what's going to break. This is what's going to
Hmm.
be very costly to you.
Hmm.
So one of the things we talked about when you and I were chatting
Mm.
was, I do think that it's important to look, and I talk about this in one of my blogs as well, to look to the bigger industries and see maybe where they've failed,
Yeah.
because they were probably able to financially absorb that
Yeah.
failure, if you
Hmm.
really want to call it a failure, but a missed opportunity,
Yeah.
the ability not to sell the product in that country, and they have other products that they can
Yes.
sell.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when
Hmm.
so um those are things that when you're a small to medium sized company,
Mm.
you can't afford to make those mistakes. So
Yeah.
look to those other companies, and things like maybe that, oh, do I have an example for the German market? Yes.
Oh,
So
are you seeing a comment there?
saw a comment
Oh,
about the German market.
oh
Let's
yeah.
talk about
Erica, do you have an
Germany.
example for?
I I do have an example for the
Ah.
German market. I do. So what was very interesting is, so you have language. Language is very important, but Germany had these rules about adult games versus children's games,
Mhm.
and that you're not supposed to market. I believe it was not marketing adult games to children.
Okay. Yeah.
So, which seems very obtuse, but
Mhm.
it's a big issue. So,
Mhm.
in marketing, we needed, let's say we were, talking about things like, you're using this device to play
Yeah.
games.
Mhm.
Yes. So, a lot of games are pretty violent. So we had to adjust those. You were forced to, again, those business critical decisions
Mhm.
where we had to show games that were uh, more child friendly. We would say no. I think they were called shooter. Like
Mhm.
you
Yeah.
so
Yeah. First person shooter
first
games,
person. Yeah,
maybe.
that was it.
Mm.
First
No, I'm
person
not even a
shooter.
gamer, but.
That's it. I'm not a gamer, but that was, grilled into my head. But yeah, that was definitely something with Germany that was really that had to be adjusted, but it
Mm.
wasn't a question of language.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that, we faced.
Mhm.
I always said that Japan was the first country that really forced
Mm.
um localization in the world that I was in. I think probably because Apple products were considered luxury, and then
Okay.
luxury is very big in Japan.
Mm.
But in the beginning, when I started working at Apple, it was like 2008,
Mhm.
and I think Apple was known as an American company.
Mm.
So you get a little slack there. But then suddenly, we want to see pictures of, we don't want to see pictures of, you know, we want to see ourselves in the
Yes.
marketing. That was a
Yeah.
big thing.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
very interesting, how that kind of started. But then when the App Store came on, suddenly Germany. Why do I got to worry about Germany? Germany should be the last place I should be worried about. So that was so that was really wild with the onset of the App Store. That was one of the first countries where we were like,
Okay, so
bit more.
Japan was quite demanding then in
Japan,
terms
well,
of
I
that
think they've got
experience.
they've got a reputation for being
Mm. Oh.
demanding. No, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a great thing because it would be sudden. At first, it was, well, Apple's an American company. Then suddenly, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. That's interesting, isn't
so
it? Yeah, that
I
is
felt
interesting.
this real demand and those
Mhm.
business critical decisions that had to be made to version. Well, this doesn't
Mhm.
make sense here. And then you
Mm.
had China, and China was, well, what are we allowed to show?
Mm. Yeah.
And then you had really interesting things. For example, the big difference between Spain and Latin America,
Mhm.
not the same. And
Yeah.
then Brazilian Portuguese is the Portuguese you use because you're trying to get to that Brazilian market,
Yeah.
but Portugal English, so what? You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so interesting to see how these things develop. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's my big
That
German experience. But
yeah, it's fascinating, isn't it? And I know I've got this quote in my head, and I'm really sorry that I can't remember where this quote is from, but I remember I think it was like I want to say it's this marketing professor in the US, but I don't want to misquote people. So,
Mhm.
but it's like basically, your brand is what your brand is what the consumer thinks it is. Or I'm not explaining this very well at all, am I? But
No,
it's
you
like
are. It's like I saw someone
it's
speak
not
at
you think that, oh, this is our brand, this is who we are, but
yes,
actually it's what the consumer has in their head about you, which is your brand,
but
if
you
you see what I
want
mean there.
to shape that not shape that you really want to drive that narrative, sort of force it, as
Mhm.
well. So
Mhm.
when there's brand guidelines, um it's interesting when we think of these. I wrote a blog about this, um about that decision making and what
Mhm.
goes into decision making.
Mhm.
So there's, of
Mhm.
course, business critical things I have to do, but then there's also those brand guidelines and brand mission, and the mission of the company. So
Mm.
if so and sometimes that will clash with
Mhm.
actually what the customer wants.
Mhm.
So you really, I think, on a big corporate level, you think you can really drive that narrative
Mhm.
across the globe, and then
Yeah.
you find that you can't. Either they're using your product to do something different with it,
Mm.
or eh, and you find that you're making tons of money in
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
that
why
country.
not?
Like, let's say, like, apparently deodorant, in places that are very humid, like, it doesn't, people use it more for the scent rather than the
Yeah.
purpose,
Mhm.
so, right, you've
Mhm.
heard that before. So, and if your deodorant is selling, like, you know, making tons of money, you know,
Mm.
in a particular region, let's say in the Caribbean or something,
Mhm.
you're gonna go with it.
Yeah, yeah.
But then there's things like, you're trying to drive, um, messaging behind diversity inclusion, and this
Yeah.
is where we're seeing, some really interesting things happen
Mhm.
across the globe, because diversity inclusion, we're seeing data that says that it's profitable, which is
Mm.
great. But then you go into a country, let's say, where there's laws against said things,
Yeah, yeah.
where there might be modesty laws, or
Mm.
you know, governments with religious, leaning.
Yeah,
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 there's a
yeah, yeah.
mixture of church and state, but just really interesting things that we're seeing, where the company still has to stay with that, where you're still trying to drive that narrative, but
Mm.
you're going to get some resistance, and you've got to
Yes.
really balance that. You may lose a few um, customers here to stick with your
Mm.
overall brand mission,
Yeah.
but it makes sense at the end of the day. So
Yes.
it's getting really complex, and I think,
Yeah, yeah.
so it's super interesting because,
Mm.
like, I think the global customer, has enormous power and,
Mhm.
um, leverage, maybe we'll
Yeah,
say,
yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
that's driving the versioning, the
Mhm.
personalization, and where the versioning comes in is for what makes good business sense, is
Mhm.
to have as few versions as possible that works for everyone. You want a one size fits all, and that's not possible. So
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I remember some of the anecdotes you were sort of telling me about last week, and and I know, I think it was with Apple, and suddenly there was a kind of a boom in Korea, and you were suddenly having to get a lot of content out in Korean, to sort of satisfy the demand there. So you've suddenly got this kind of urgency on it.
right, and when you're doing some of these urgent, I think you have to take a step back and
Mhm.
think about who the critical players need to be. For example, um, what's the team
Mhm.
on the ground? What are they receiving?
Mhm.
Because, for example, if you send someone something that's the US version,
Yeah.
you know, and then they turn that on, you're like, oh, I think,
Yeah.
and, so, but it's really interesting when you start to see, what was so interesting about Korea is that in South Korea, Samsung is the big, it,
Mm.
it, the, the big company there.
Yeah.
So it's actually interesting that there was a big demand, but you follow that
Mm.
demand and
Mm.
and then you're like, oh wait, now we need, you know, now we need Korean photography.
Yeah.
Like now we need, so now we need to we need to show that yes, this is you buying this product. But then that's where the customer is in the driver's seat and
Mm.
gets that personalization, and you make those decisions based on the customer demand.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think that's something. And but it's interesting because I think people in headquarters, for
Mhm.
example, I
Mhm.
think they don't really understand, they don't get to see that, um, how things change as they travel. So
Mhm.
I think
Yeah.
it's a really great idea for localization teams
Mhm.
to show the domestic teams, hey, this is what happens.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, if you've, I think it's fun when you travel and you go to you know, the local stores, the
Mhm.
resellers, and
Mhm.
you see the difference, you
Yeah.
know, I think, of what happened to the marketing deliverables or what parts remained in English and,
Mm.
um, do they even make sense? That's what, but it's really interesting,
Yeah.
because you do your best to make sure everything has that same look and feel, because
Mm.
that's brand integrity. Brand
Yeah.
integrity is being able to go anywhere in the world in a train
Mhm.
station and still have that same feeling. I know that this is that product no matter
Yeah.
where I am. Like McDonald's is a really
Mhm.
great,
Mhm.
example, or
Mhm.
Starbucks. I look for the Starbucks when I travel,
Yeah.
which is a bad idea, but in a way it's home for me, and I know what
Yeah.
I'm getting instead of, getting things lost in translation. Like I might be allergic to that, or especially as I
Mm.
get older, I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I know what you
I
mean
was young
though.
and I'll eat anything, now I'm like, okay, I just want to make sure one meal I kind of know wherever,
You get a bit cautious as you get older,
yeah,
don't you?
it's
Yeah, it's so
terrible.
true.
Don't do it.
But yeah, it's like yeah, I lived in Japan for about 7 or 8 years, and it's true, isn't it? You like those kind of familiar experiences. You know, you can walk in, you know what you're getting,
I mean, I
and
don't want that all the time.
yeah,
Believe
yeah,
me, when I was in Japan, though it was funny, we went to this one breakfast, like American breakfast place.
hmm
It was so cool to go to. I think on the outside, I think it said Frankfurt instead of like Frankfurters, or I don't know what it was.
okay,
It was some
okay,
weird dinery type of,
uh-huh,
like, their take on an American diner,
uh-huh,
but it was
okay,
fine. I was like, "I'm home for a minute," you know?
yeah,
But yet, of
yeah.
course, you shouldn't even travel if you're not gonna get the local experience, and that is what I want, but I
Yeah,
also want to be like, "Okay, I know what this is."
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's that familiarity, isn't it? And I know, yeah, you had mentioned, that for the bigger companies, if they make a mistake, they can pull it off. They've got the product. They're in
They
different
can afford
places.
it, they can absorb it, and
Mhm.
maybe they're also the pioneers,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
can look
yeah,
for that. I mean,
yeah.
of course, you're not looking to copy, and then there's another side of that coin where,
Mhm,
especially here in the Silicon Valley, where it's like,
mhm.
in order to be innovative, you don't even look at the past. You just move forward. And yet, of
Uh-huh.
course, you're going to repeat a mistake that someone did in the past.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a common thing that
Mhm,
it's called, you'll maybe hear people say, if it wasn't invented here.
mhm.
So, but all the notes have been written before. So
Yeah.
it's really an interesting, delicate balance. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to ruin your creative space. I want you to
Mm.
be innovative. But on the other side, if you don't if you're not aware
Mm-hmm.
of what's going on in the marketplace, in
Mm-hmm.
the world, and these, faux pas that
Yeah.
that that a company makes. For example, using a number or a
Mm-hmm.
color or something that's pretty blatant, or even a news event,
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm.
I remember this if there's like different things that would happen where so the more content you use,
Mm-hmm.
the more the more you're open to mistakes, or and chances you'll insult someone. All
Mm.
those things. So more opportunities for faux
Yeah.
pas.
Yeah.
And when I left Apple, I noticed that most companies, you had a website and you made it available in these languages.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm.
because we're upping the digital experience
Yeah.
and we're getting into that, we're getting into fields, we're getting
Mm-hmm.
into things like diversity and inclusion,
Yeah.
um, where there's accessibility issues. The last blog I just released was all about accessibility, which I
Yeah.
think is really fascinating and does have an impact on the localization industry.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so fascinating to see. It's as we start working on that digital experience, there's so many lessons that you can get from marketing.
Mm.
Um, and I think the business world thinks marketing is very separate and,
Mm-hmm.
should be in that silo. And then you've got localization in their silo and maybe
Yeah.
advertising over here and finance over here. But what we're seeing now with things like even the project management methodologies, and when you talk about lead generation and
Mm.
marketing, lead generation is sales and marketing supporting each other and working
Yeah.
efficiently and collaborating.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Agile is all
Mm.
about collaborating and working efficiently and
Yeah.
having, common terminology. And so collaboration is key,
Yeah.
and to saving money, being efficient, and that's the trend. So if that's the
Mm.
trend, we ride the trend, but
Mm-hmm.
also looking at what other companies are doing. For example, Gap
Mm-hmm.
did a big, logo change, like a big,
Yes.
right?
That didn't go so well, did it?
Didn't go so well for them, but really great stuff that you can learn if you're considering changing your
Yes.
brand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or let's say you're going into the um, Southeast Asian market,
Mm-hmm.
and you can look to see. I mean, really, you can just Google, or any search engine, but whatever, go on your search engine and type in mistakes made in, you know, marketing mistakes made in, or,
Yeah.
it's
I'm
really
gonna
easy
do
and you
that.
find
Yeah.
a lot of wealth of stuff. And these
Yeah. Yeah.
really funny stories, may save you a lot of money. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it
Absolutely.
depends how your team is structured and how big your
Mm.
company is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because, uh, because I think when you're working with creatives, or when you're working with anyone, you want to set them up for success
Mm-hmm.
and give them all the tools they need. I call it creating like a little sandbox where you put the toys they need, that they're
Mm-hmm.
gonna want,
Yeah.
and of course they're not going to have everything they need, but if you did your best to make
Yeah.
sure that they had everything they needed, you
Yeah.
for
That's great. Yeah. I like
so
that. The
you need
sandbox. Yeah.
someone to be looking out.
Yeah.
That's what I'd like to be, like that person who's sort of looking out for what could go wrong, looking, making sure that
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
prepared.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm.
my co
Yeah.
well, I don't know
Yep.
maybe I should
Shit.
cover
Yeah.
that.
It's all right. We've had barking dogs on the show before. There's absolutely fine.
Yeah, the dog is behaving herself at the moment,
That's
which is
great. That's
shocking, but the cat can't help
the cat.
herself
The
when I'm
cat. It just
on.
wants some attention.
No, not
You
with
are
laptop
live on
open, and
LinkedIn.
she's like, "I'm in, I'm here." There's nothing I don't know, I've tried many things. Maybe that will be, if like post pandemic, oh, we got barking dogs outside. Okay, we got that.
Okay, okay, yeah,
We got
we
it
can
all. We got it all.
still
Uh,
um,
but yeah,
yeah, so
and my
yeah,
dog's
I mean,
growling.
it is such a fascinating topic, isn't it? And so, this we're sort of talking on a very sort of grand level here, sort of on a very global scale, multiple, markets.
Right.
If there are people watching this, if there are people watching this live stream, then thinking about smaller companies that are looking at going into maybe their first
Right,
overseas
and how does it
market.
relate to them? Because I think companies thought, well, we're not going to ever have to deal
Yeah.
with an issue that Apple dealt with, or
Yes.
Google,
So
or
we
the
don't have
Gap,
to. We don't need to do
or
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Clorox, right? Like I don't got to deal with with
Mm.
the problems that these IKEA or whatever that they, that they had to
Yeah.
deal
Yeah.
with.
I think it's probably
But
true, isn't it?
because there is some, because there is that demand for personalization, because
Mm.
there are guidelines
Yeah.
related to accessibility, related to
Mm-hmm.
inclusion and diversity, and you have these brand missions that say
Mm.
you know, we're inclusive and diverse,
Mm.
um and I think so. All companies need to be aware and be
Yeah.
very careful
Mm-hmm.
about cultural implications
Mm-hmm.
as they globalize,
Yeah.
and they can be prepared. And that when you create a product, create it knowing it's going to be global. And
Yes.
it's not inclusive to just marketing, it's the product experience
Mm.
itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that's key. And
Yeah. I've heard that before, just for example, like with a website, don't just, you've got a website, you've built it up, it's all done in your kind of like language. And then you're like, okay, now we're going to translate it because we want to go into this market. But, ideally sort of far earlier on, like sort of,
mhm.
I think it was the guy Chris from HubSpot that I think I'm quoting here. I'm not very accurate at the quoting tonight, but I think when he was at HubSpot and he had said, it was global first. I think that was their
I think there's
um
so much you can learn from HubSpot.
slow.
That's a great
Yeah,
company to follow.
yeah.
I
So
learned so much from them. But
yeah, yeah, and it's fascinating. It's like don't sort of have the translation, the localization as an afterthought or as an add-on at the end, but like
or
if
bring
you,
them in at the last
yeah,
minute. And that's where
yeah,
I
yeah,
think our
yeah.
rebranding needs to come into play,
Mm-hmm.
because the localization professionals need to be top of mind. And maybe you
Mm.
don't have a localization team. I like how my cat's got her leg in the air. But
He's having a great time.
yeah, it's like a little rude, sweetheart. Okay, we'll
You
just
can just
try
be
to
leaning that way, leaning.
go look over there. Um, but I think for localization teams to really see where they have an impact, and then
Mhm.
vice versa, where um, where they impact each other and where they should be collaborating. So the whole thing about being brought into a discussion
Mhm.
e- early on, even though you're probably not going to be doing your part till later, is
Yeah.
a very service provider, I think, type of mentality.
Mhm.
Whereas the strategic partner mentality is, I
Mm.
bring you in the discussion as
Yeah.
early as possible
Yes. Yeah.
so that you can prevent mistakes from happening, you
Mm.
can highlight missed opportunities, and
Mhm.
also be able to carry that that history
Yeah.
of, these are the things that we want to live as it travels throughout, as
Mm.
something globalizes. But I think small companies think, well, it's not going to affect me, I just make you know a toaster.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
how are they ordering your toaster online, and what's the experience, and
Yes.
what's the
Yeah.
packaging like, and what's the there's details now that companies are really having to look at,
Mm.
and it includes the global customer. And the global customer, this is what I said in the blog that I wrote about accessibility. I mean,
Mhm.
you can't assume that your global customers don't have the same accessibility issues
Yeah.
as your domestic customer would. Of course they do.
Yeah.
So of
Yeah.
course you have hearing impaired customers
Mm.
globally, and of course, of course,
Yeah, yeah. You've got it's
So,
gets very complex, doesn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
so, and I think the other things that's it it it's so interesting to me right now. The
Mhm.
blog I'm writing right now is about identity, which is an issue that I've wanted to tackle for a long time. But I
Mm.
think we're starting. The world has gotten smaller
Yeah.
because of digital,
Yeah.
and that's given people a platform and a voice. So people
Mm.
who have identified a certain way
Mhm.
culturally, through their gender. I mean,
Mm.
it's not really related. Faith, it could be so many different things.
Mm. Mhm.
um Accessibility issues, what,
Mhm.
these all uh, define a person.
Mhm.
And as as people have their platforms to speak, since it's digital, it can also be quantified.
Yes. Yeah.
So
Mm.
and you have the data.
Yeah.
So we were talking about this, where people say like, "Oh, people are so sensitive now, it must
Mm.
be those millennials and now those Zs, they can't handle the
Ah,
world."
Generation
And
Z.
that's
Yeah.
not what it is. I don't think that's what it is at all. I think,
Uh-huh.
I didn't have social media growing up.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah.
if I did, things would have been different. But you're starting to see, oh, wait, there's all these other people like me. Yes.
Mm.
Tag,
Yeah.
yes, hashtag, yes, follow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you have that data, and which is great, because then I
Mhm.
think that also gives the localization team an argument to say, hey, we got the data, we can,
Yeah.
there is the demand
Absolutely.
for this, and there is
Yeah.
the demand for this in this country. But I
Mhm.
think as the world gets smaller and smaller, and you have these platforms, that's why now we have identity is such a big issue, and it's not
Mhm.
just what we thought it was. For example, the Spanish customer wants this.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
The average Japanese customer wants this.
Yeah.
It's so varied and
Yes. Yeah. It's slightly terrifying though, isn't it?
slightly terrifying.
Overwhelming to be,
But
it can
that's
be
where I
overwhelming.
think that's where the localization team, I think, comes in as the voice of reason, to say, what are
Mhm.
these business critical decisions that we have to make? And the earlier you bring them in, the better.
Mm.
Because I think you can really be that sounding board, and
Mhm.
the trusted advisor to
Mhm.
come in and really say, okay,
Mhm.
yes, something's going to break at some point, but
Yeah,
we're going
yeah.
to try to prevent that from we're going to do our best to prevent what the knowns,
Yes.
and we have so much at our disposal. So yes, everything's kind of
So
overwhelming. But
the because that's also quite sort of marketing as well, isn't it? But maybe
Mhm.
marketing is more sort of it's very aligned with sort of sales and sales
I
goals,
think
and then
everything's integrated, because
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
thing. You know, I think when those localization marketing positions started to
Mhm.
show up,
Mm.
and that was thought of to be something very different and very specialized, because you're going to be working on marketing deliverables. But
Yeah.
really, the product is actually also, with that digital experience, that complex
Yes.
digital experience, is
Mhm.
also facing the same issues that they face in marketing.
Mhm.
So I think the collaborative process needs to be
Yeah.
throughout the organization.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
so I So
Yeah.
I'm very anti-silo, and
Mm.
I think that becomes from working for a very large organization
Mhm.
where you have totally separate areas of expertise.
Yeah.
However, there's so many things that we could teach each other
Yeah. Yeah.
and learn from. And so, and then, but you're moving so fast and
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
working really hard. When do you have time to
Mhm.
collaborate? And well, you have to make the time to
Yeah.
share
Mhm.
experiences
Mhm.
and know who to bring into what discussions. And I think those are the key elements, um, to be successful. I think those to bring those right people in the room,
Yeah.
get
Yes. It
identify those stakeholders.
it's so true, isn't it? It's just so it seems like it's so easy to slip into that mold of sort of each to their own, and yeah, it almost feels like it's kind of human nature to sort of lean in that direction, whereas
I
it's
think it is
yeah.
totally. It totally is, because especially the longer you've worked for an organization, I've had very
Mm,
long-term roles, and the
mhm,
longer you worked for an organization, you think like,
mhm.
listen, I've seen this before.
Uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah.
It failed. And then
Mhm.
I'm, the Debbie Downer again. But
I love Debbie Downer.
but I think it's interesting what you brought up about, marketing, and
Mm,
but there's so much that marketing can teach the product team.
right. Mm,
And I would see that definitely, because as you started to test the products,
mhm,
the marketing team is testing, well, you may have a global team testing some or seeing how something works in their country
mhm.
and seeing if it's broken, or they have a lot of input
Yeah,
that will go back to that needs to go back to the product team even,
yeah.
by the way, another language showed up when I pressed this button and I
Okay,
expected
yep,
this,
yep.
or
Mhm,
by the
mhm.
way,
Yeah.
German especially. Oh, German. So many things you can
What?
learn
Tell
from
me about the
German.
German.
Well, German, I mean, the words, you work on, let's say, the word's gonna
Oh,
fit
they're
on the
crazy
screen.
long, aren't they? They're crazy long. You see, this is the issue we have. So a lot of our content is sort of it's dual language, English, German, and it's like we'll make something for the English, and then like all your white space and your nice looking uh brochure flyer has gone out the window because like these mega long German words. And my colleague, she will sometimes, so she'll take it from English into German, and she's just like, can you just make sure that the sentences are not too long, and
But
you know
also, you've gotta make those critical decisions for,
mhm, mhm.
and you still have to stay true. So there's something
Yeah.
called truth in advertising. And that's
Mhm,
what we learn from advertising, is you
mhm.
can't boast that you can do something and then you can't.
Yeah.
So it's gotta fit in the field, and
Mhm,
so there's a lot of coordination and collaboration that has to
mhm,
be had with engineers and
mhm,
product
mm.
team and marketing.
Yeah.
It's not, so the problems that you may have faced in marketing that you're used to, which are, of course, German won't fit on the screen, and and then you gain space with Japanese, or
Yeah, yeah.
now you're starting to see so many technical issues. For
Mhm.
example, um, it the text wasn't Unicode, so it,
Okay.
and
Mm.
it just things are
Mm.
breaking. That's when something breaks, and
Yeah.
there's so many things I think collaboratively that marketing could teach the product team, but
Mhm.
it shouldn't. But if you wait till you're way down in the funnel, then
Mhm.
that's where you're also going to waste money and time. And
Mm. That's brilliant. So yeah, so yeah, collaboration, and then the right people coming together to have the right conversations, kind of maybe earlier than you might have anticipated would be probably your advice
It's
for.
not a waste of time. Don't think of
Mm,
it as a waste of time. It's being brought in a room, even if you're just listening.
yeah, yeah.
Even if you're just listening, because I would be brought into some creative discussions where I
Hmm.
had zero input, but I would think, oh, okay, China's gonna not be happy. Or,
Yeah. Okay.
but there's so many different things where you start to really understand the
Mm,
foundation, the meaning, the impact the team wants to
yes.
have. I mean, just the
Hmm.
messaging that they want to get across, and
Hmm.
to make sure that message does you does get communicated as you've added all these different layers,
Mm,
translation or
yeah.
transcreation or
Yeah.
and then so what are we doing with the language, where are the images, and so
Yeah.
the more complex,
Hmm.
and that's where we are. So if you
Mm,
look back 5 years
hmm.
to where we are now,
Mm,
there's so much complexity,
yeah.
and with everything that you start to discuss, whether it's even SEO or you know,
Yeah.
um
It's got so complex, but the thing is, as soon as you sort of understand it and you kind of implement things, and then it's changed. It's just it's constantly evolving, so you
it
can never
is, but I think
feel like
without
you're.
the collaboration
Mm,
and working in very siloed, things are going to break and
mhm,
very costly mistakes are going to happen. So
mm,
whereas
mhm.
before it seemed like a nice to have that we talk to each other, but
Yeah,
now
yeah.
we could really learn from each other. We have really
Mm,
valuable information. I find it so interesting when a company has a marketing team, like localization companies have marketing teams.
mhm.
They have so much great information that they can offer. uh, the the language professionals and the project managers.
Yeah.
So it's there needs to be alignment within
Mm,
any organization,
yeah.
and alignment between client and service providers,
Mm,
which should be also a strategic partner,
mhm.
where you're seeing it's just those gaps in
Yeah.
communication
Mhm.
where, well, I didn't think you needed to know that. Well,
Well, funny you should say that.
funny you should say you do need to know that. So I think constant, having that regular uh, sharing of information on,
Mm,
like, here's a standard deck of where we are, and
mhm,
here's who we are and what we're responsible for,
mm,
and so, and when a new person starts at an organization, they should be introduced to the rest of the organization, and clearly understand what their functions are
mm.
and what they can help with, and and really start, and really analyze where, who the stakeholders are,
Mhm, mhm,
and that needs to evolve, and be aware of what's happening
mm.
in other organizations, because it might apply to you, or even um, world events. So
Yeah.
if you have a marketing campaign that's out there,
Mm.
and then you don't need to read every news blurb, but you be aware of what's out
Yeah.
there, because what something can be, that's if there's some sort of a scandal
Mm.
in South Korea
Mhm.
or New Zealand, you know, that made made the global news sphere, got
Yeah.
that um then, and it impacts your marketing, you need
Mm.
to pay attention. I mean, that is
Yes.
that
Yeah.
is loud and clear that
Yeah, yeah.
if that and if it may seem silly to you, like, I was thinking of that big scandal in South Korea that happened, where the vice president. It was the macadamia nut scandal, where I think the woman was the daughter of the owner of the airline or something, and she made the plane go back because the macadamia nuts weren't taken out of the package and put on a plate. Now, you probably
Okay.
won't have a macadamia nut campaign, but if you did and you heard that, you'd be like, whoa, okay. Because suddenly macadamia nuts became
A
really
thing.
popular at the time, because I guess people in South Korea were like, well, what's so special about these must be really special. I think she even went to prison for it, but like
Oh
it
my
was it
God.
was a big deal. But you know, we may look at it and we're like, it's freaking macadamia nuts. Like, what's the big deal? But if something
Yeah.
became international, this was international headlines at the time because
Yeah.
she
Yeah.
made the plane turnaround.
Oh my
And
God.
then, uh, I guess the
Brilliant.
government
That's
wasn't,
your moment.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but you hear something and then, wait a minute, and then you dig a little deeper. If you're like, well, I actually do sell macadamia nuts, or I'm put macadamia nuts in my campaign. So it's good to look at world events and see,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
could
Yeah.
have
Definitely. Yeah.
something, that impacts your campaign, and then,
Yeah.
you know, so uh,
Be aware.
do be aware.
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Absolutely.
do be aware.
Oh well, that is fascinating. Well, we're coming up. I knew this would go quickly. We're so at an hour and 5 minutes, and that has been brilliant. It's so good to talk to you. I know last time we spoke, it was the same. We went through an hour and covered a lot of stuff. But this has been really good.
Good.
And
I hope we weren't. I mean, we're sort of like general, but I think,
well, we could always come back again and do some more.
yeah.
So
But yeah, I think just, you can learn from. You'd be surprised who you can learn from and
mhm.
take from. So that's what I'm trying to do with my blog right now, is sharing my experiences, and hopefully other people can say, oh, that impacts
Yes.
me now. So that's
Yes.
great. Thanks.
So tell us where we can find the
You can
blog.
find my blog on LinkedIn and subscribe. It's called Globalization Motivation. That's the
Okay.
name. And also on my website, haimsconsulting.com. You can find my blog there as well. And I share hopefully some good nuggets from my
Yeah.
experiences in the music industry
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
what I'm seeing right now.
Mm.
Just sort of connect the dots,
Yeah.
and promote collaboration, because
Yeah.
I think it's vital.
That's what will, yeah, help us all succeed. Well, yes, thank you, and all the best with
Thank you.
all your adventures. And that's been brilliant. I'm sure there's a lot to take away from this hour. I've got a page full of notes, and I'm going to take them back to the office with me. So that's been
I
brilliant.
hope it's helpful, and
It
yeah, reach
is.
out to me on LinkedIn.
Yes.
I'm
Yes.
there. I'm pretty active on
Yeah.
that platforms. I think it's a
Yeah.
great professional platform,
Yes. Yeah.
the professional platform, and
Yeah. Brilliant.
yeah,
Well, I wish you a nice what time is it now in San Francisco? It must be
it's
sort of
about
lunch. Okay.
noonish,
So time for a lunch break.
Yes.
And then enjoy the rest of your day. And it would be lovely to keep in touch. And also, it's coming up to December, so have a great Christmas break.
Yes, happy
Yes,
holidays. The
indeed.
holiday
Oh my
season.
God, already. But anyway, okay. Thank you so much, Erica, and we'll speak again soon. Goodbye.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.